Helter Skelter. Two words that defined one of the darkest and most infamous chapters in American criminal history. Two words that sold millions of books, shaped a sensational trial, and convinced the world it understood exactly what the Manson family was and why they killed. For nearly 6 decades, that has been the accepted narrative. And for a long time, I believed it too. Then I started asking different questions. I spent 3 years researching and writing my book, The Manson Family, More to the Story, because I believed the real truth was buried underneath that narrative. I discovered that before the verdicts, before the trials, before the arrests in Death Valley, and long before the killings in the summer swelter of 1969, they were just young people in a turbulent era, seekers, drifters, believers, drawn toward something that felt, in those early days, like the most beautiful thing they'd ever experienced. This podcast is that story. After they camped on Bobby's lawn, Charlie and the women moved to an abandoned house on Fernwood Street, then to a cabin on Summit Trail, where they were visited by Phil Kaufman, newly released from jail. After one of Kaufman's visits, his friend Harold True picked him up. Harold, an overweight college student in his mid-20s, lived on Waverly Drive in the Los Feliz neighborhood. That spring, Charlie asked if his clan could move into Harold's house. Harold had 3 roommates, though. It had to be a unanimous decision, and the roommates said no. But they weren't averse to letting friends sleep on their couch for a night or two. Charlie visited the Waverly house several times between March and August of 1968 when Harold moved out of the house. But Manson gravitated back to that neighborhood in the summer of 1969 during the family's killing spree. In March, Charlie's counterfeiter friend visited from San Francisco. Danny tried again to pull Charlie into his schemes, but Charlie declined. 4 new women came into the fold at this time: Deidre Shaw, Nancy Pittman, Stephanie Rowe, and Sandra Good. Deidre, Dee Shaw, was born April of 1953 to famed actress Angela Lansbury and her second husband, Peter Shaw. Dee grew up in Malibu with 2 older brothers. The children were frequently left in the care of their father, while their celebrated mother was traveling the world, and by her mid-teens, Dee was dabbling in drugs. In a 2014 interview with Daily Mail, Angela Lansbury lamented, "It started with cannabis, but moved on to heroin. There were factions up in the hills above Malibu that were dedicated to deadly pursuits. It pains me to say it, but at one stage, Deidre was in with a crowd led by Charles Manson. She was one of many youngsters who knew him, and they were fascinated. He was an extraordinary character, charismatic in many ways, no question about it." Manson was especially fond of Dee. She gave him hope that the children of other stars would flock to him, helping him to become famous. Plus, she had Mommy's credit cards. Those cards were used to buy food and clothing for several months. Dee also introduced her friend, Nancy Pittman, to Manson. Nancy Laura Pittman was born New Year's Day of 1951 in Malibu. She was the oldest child of an aerospace engineer and his society matron wife. Her life was one of privilege and wealth. But Nancy began to question her fortunate status by her teens. Just a few days after Dee introduced her to Manson, Nancy got into a fight with her folks and was kicked out of the house. she came to Topanga and joined Charlie, Mary, Lynn, Pat, Susan, Ella, Dianne, and Bruce. Nancy was also an avid surfer and a talented seamstress. Her sewing skills were later employed on the famous Charlie vest in 1970.
Nancy and Deirdre came from Malibu bringing food from their parents' cupboards.
Lynette Fromme wrote in her 2018 memoir, Reflection.
They'll never miss it. Dee Dee assured us they don't even know it's there. The girls also presented us with high-quality cannabis and LSD. They knew all the best dealers at the high school. Deirdre was of strong English-Irish stock, resilient and good-natured. She wore jeans and soft blouses, too adventurous for dresses, and she looked like a child when she grinned. On a warm afternoon, she sat on our roof strumming a guitar and singing to herself, while below, Charlie and I listened, and he said tenderly, "Look at her! She's 10 times the actress her mother is without even trying." Nancy was tougher, more headstrong and feisty. She grew up the only girl in a large family of brothers. She was petite and pretty, but a scrapper, full of stick-to-itness.
Stephanie Rowe was born March 23, 1950, in Los Angeles. Later, several family members noted that Stephanie's mother was Jewish. There were a few Jewish and half-Jewish members of the family, defying Manson's famed obsession with the Nazis. Stephanie remained with the family from spring to fall of '68, but not much is known about her. She had dark curly hair and thick eyebrows, and according to Lynette Fromme was
the medieval sort, the tavern wench, buxom and shy with surprising bursts of hilarity.
Manson had a type, and he groomed women to take on a certain look. As previously stated, he encouraged the women to stay slender, and they stopped shaving their legs and under their arms. Also, as Dianne Lake wrote in Member of the Family, My Story of Charles Manson, Life Inside His Cult, and the Darkness That Ended the '60s, published in 2017 by William Morrow.
Most of us had long hair now. Charlie insisted we not cut it because he said women were supposed to have their crown of glory.
He also hated when a woman wore makeup. Interestingly, his first followers included 3 women with red or reddish blonde hair: Mary, Lynette, and Dianne. His own mother was a redhead, and when you recall his violent rages against some of these women, it makes you wonder if he wasn't somehow lashing out vicariously at Kathleen Maddox. In late March, another California-born woman visited the group. 23-year-old Sandra Collins Good hailed from San Diego. Her father was a wealthy stockbroker, and Sandy was the eldest of 4 sisters. She was an intelligent, sensitive girl who suffered from severe respiratory infections as a child. Sandy had numerous scars on her throat from early surgeries. She had been an exceptional high school student, then matriculated first to the University of Oregon and later San Francisco State College. Sandy remembered that Manson was stroking a kitty cat when she first saw him. She found him mysterious and compelling. Sandy and her boyfriend, Joel PUGH, were in the area visiting an artist friend, John Irwin Friedman, a.k.a. Partee, from the Bay Area. Manson also knew Friedman. Lynette, who later grew very close to Sandy, described her as
like the faceless secretary in old movies who becomes stunning with the simple removal of hairpins and glasses.
Joel, almost 4 years older than his girlfriend, was a lab technician at the University of San Francisco. Originally from Minnesota, he also held a degree in zoology. Joel was offbeat and quirky, and had a rather protective nature when it came to the high-strung Sandy. He defended her to his friends, who did not understand the attraction. In fact, many of his peers disliked Sandra Good. Joel saw her gravitate toward Manson during this visit and was discomfited. His brother Daniel later explained, "When she started hanging around with Manson, Joel was extremely embarrassed about it. He regarded Manson as a phony who was very full of himself and a sort of embarrassing character. He didn't want Sandy to have anything to do with a guy like that, sort of uncool by association." Manson was what Joel, in his own words, would have called a gnarl. Sandy and Joel went back to San Francisco, but Sandy returned alone a few days later. She flew to Los Angeles in a private jet on April 1st, bringing a monthly trust fund with her. She became Charlie's new favorite cutie. That very night, Sandy was initiated through group sex into Manson's growing tribe. Sandy later proved invaluable by locating a new home for the group. Partee, the artist, was staying in the back house of a run-down Western movie ranch in Chatsworth with his family. Chatsworth was a rural area north of Los Angeles. It was bordered by the 188 freeway to the north, the Santa Susana Pass State Road to the south, and the community of Simi Valley to the west. The property was owned by George Spahn, a blind 79-year-old rancher and animal trainer. Both Spahn and his ranch had fallen on hard times. The property had been used as a film set for many years, the site of numerous Western movies and television shows, including Zorro and The Lone Ranger. But by 1968, Spahn owed thousands of dollars in back taxes on the property, plus the Hollywood community had long since abandoned their use of his film sets. Other than the occasional Marlboro commercial, by the late 60s, George was reduced to selling pony rides to children to make ends meet. Sandy visited Spahn Ranch with Partee and whispered, upon her return, in Charlie's ear, the ranch would be the perfect place for them. Sandy didn't meet George Spahn during her visit, so he did not know of her idea. The elderly rancher was, however, growing desperate to take care of those taxes. He agreed to lease part of the property that summer to a film crew, making a pornographic movie. Thank you for listening to the Manson Family, more to the story. In this podcast, we focus on peeling back the layers, one chapter at a time, in order to demystify the family and destroy the myths that leave us in the stone-cold dark. In our next episode, Stranger in a Strange Land, the family experiences one of its most sacred moments when Mary gives birth surrounded by the people she loves, a shared event so profound it binds them together in ways that nothing else could. But the world outside has little patience for people who live differently, and two police encounters remind them that in 1968 America, simply existing outside the mainstream is a reason enough to be arrested. Is it any wonder that young people who felt hunted by the very society that failed them found more safety and loyalty inside the family than outside it? This is H. Allegra Lansing. The story of the family and the murders of 1969 have always been more than a crime story. This is a human story, and there is an imperative to understand it, because the vulnerabilities that drew those young people into darkness are not unique to them. They belong to all of us. This podcast series is drawn from my book, The Manson Family, More to the Story, published by Story Stratosphere, and is based on historical records, contemporary reporting, and archival research. Citations for this episode can be found in the show notes. All writing and most narration by yours truly. Theme music is Masked by Silent Partner, with additional scoring from Echoes of Time by Kevin MacLeod.